Hello and welcome to a Brothers Creed podcast, where we talk about what motivates us, experiences that drive us, and exploring what's beyond the horizon, right?
There's a lot out there.
There's a lot. I'm Jared.
I'm Ethan.
And today we are in the Halloween spirit, as I'm sure you guys all are as well. And we're going to talk about some interesting spooky stories, some spooky legends, and some personal experiences and some experience of those around us. So we're very excited.
Let's hit it.
You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in the pocket.
We will not go quietly into the night.
They tell me you're a man with true grit.
I am the one who knocks.
Don't ever tell me what I can't do, ever!
That's how winning is done.
Okay, so let's talk about some spooky stories. So, I have two stories today that happened to. One of them happened to me, and then one of them happened to. I heard firsthand from a lady that was involved with one. And so, first, I'm going to tell the story that was the one that I heard firsthand from a lady that was kind of involved with the story. So I guess to kind of put myself in context of what happened here is this is when I was in Mexico. I was in Mexico, central Mexico, for 2 years as a service missionary for my church. So I paid to be there for 2 years and spent time just going around talking to people about the gospel of Jesus Christ and whatnot. And so we mingled a lot of times with the members in that area, the members of the church in that area. And you get to hear a lot of different stories, a lot of different experiences. And Mexico, particularly, Latin America generally, is especially superstitious. And I think that, like, that area of the world, people, I've only been,
It's the same. While you were, right after Jared was in Mexico, I was in Chile in South America, which is also Latin country, and it's the same. There's a lot of superstition that goes along, yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, people have kind of, they believe that, and I think that because of that, they're more attuned to it, and they see it more often. I think sometimes, like here in America, I think a lot of people are less attuned to it, but I think it does happen. Maybe they just disregard it or whatnot, but it's almost like if you believe it's there, then you'll kind of manifest that almost. But anyway, so this is a kind of interesting story. So I was in a place called Guanajuato, and that was the state and the city. And this is kind of a weird city. It's all hills. It's in this area they call La Cuna de la Independencia, and that is like the birthplace of the independence or the revolution. So this is the first Mexican Revolution. And I think it was 1812. The second Mexican Revolution, I believe, was in 1912, and that was with Pancho Villa.
Fact check that.
I'm pretty sure, because I remember right before I left, the guy was like, oh, yeah, in 2000, or maybe, yeah, it might be a little bit different. Anyway, I think it actually is different. That's not right. It's a couple years before that, because I remember that when I was going to get back from the mission, the guy was like, oh, yeah, there's going to be a third Mexican Revolution. And it was like 6 months after I was leaving. And this was in sometime in 2009. So maybe it was before that. Anyway, so it's a great area, cool area, really old area. And there's a lot of legends in there. In fact, they have in this area, they have the mummies. There's these people that they when they died, they buried them in the ground. And the clay preserved their bodies, and they're actually like mummies. They call them las mumias. De Guanajuato, and so they're kind of cool to see. And there's lots of legends there and stuff that's going on. So this is a story that I was meeting with one of the ladies, and we call each other brothers and sisters, because we're all brothers and sisters here on Earth, and we call the people that we were around sisters. We would say hermana, or we call them sister. And we were talking to this old lady, and she was kind of like the Mexican version of a babushka. Just like an old lady, seasoned like you wouldn't believe, seen everything. She's had all the experiences, and she knows what's going on. Like, you don't want to mess with this lady. And so we were just talking to her, and she said, yeah, there was and she told us a story about these two elders, these two missionaries. So the story goes that they went up on a hike. So there's a bunch of hills in this area, and they went on a hike up to one of these hills one day, and it's a kind of a famous hill, and they went up there, and there's a statue at the top of this hill of a saint. And they started walking around, and they were just looking around on the ground. And one of the things they started seeing is they noticed that in the dirt, there were a bunch of coins laying on the ground, old coins that were all over the ground and just in the dirt. And these missionaries were saying, "Hey, man, this is pretty cool. Like, this, all this stuff's just laying in the dirt. Maybe this is some lost pocket change, or maybe this is a treasure we found." So they pick all the coins up, and they end up with a handful of old coins, and they're like, "Yeah, this is pretty cool." And so they end up going home, going back to their apartment, leaving the coins in their apartment. They go throughout their day. They do the things that they need to do, and then they get back, and they didn't probably know at the time, but that was probably one of the worst decisions they could have made. And would be a preamble to the most terrifying nights of their lives. So that night, the two missionaries are laying in bed. The beds were facing a pair of French doors, and there was two beds, and they were looking out. You could look out the French doors, and you could see part of the kitchen in the hallway. And they're awakened by noises in their apartment. They started seeing shadows walking across these French door, walking down the hall. And basically they just froze and looked at each other and like, what is happening? They started hearing whispers in the hallway, and they started seeing more shadows, not just one, but more shadows walk by, and they started hearing things in the kitchen moving around, silverware, cups, things starting to make noise in the kitchen, and they were basically paralyzed. They just were so scared they didn't even know what to do. They just laid in bed, terrified the entire night. When dawn broke, the noises and the shadows subsided, and they were like, whatever happened last night was no bueno. And we want to get rid of this. And so they actually went to go talk to this lady who I was talking to, because like I said, she was the one to talk to. And so they go to this lady, and they're like, "Hey, so we like last night saw all kinds of shadows. Stuff was moving in our apartment. We heard whisperings. We heard it was like almost like people whispering and talking, and it freaked us out really bad." And she's like, "Well," she was trying to ask some questions. "Well, what did you guys do yesterday? Did you go anywhere, do anything?" And like, "Yeah, we went up to this hill, and that big hill up there where there's that statue, and we found a bunch of cool coins that we picked up, and we took them home." And she's like, "You did what?" And you're like, "Yeah, we took the coins." And she's like, "No, you should not have done that." What the lady told me is that she said that sometimes brujas or witches will go up there, and they will throw these coins as offerings to the statue, trying to get something. Obviously, if you offer something, you want something in return, right? So these are some type of offering to that, so that they can get something in return. And so by taking that, they were taking something that was not offered to them. And then they brought that back into their house. So she's like, "You need to go take that back up there and put that back on the ground where you found it." And so they're like, "Okay." So they go back to their apartment, and then they hike back up to that. They hike back up to the hill. Luckily, it's not too hard of a hike. And then they sprinkled the coins back on the ground where they found them in the dirt. And they got home that evening and said a prayer, hoping that nothing would be there. And it was actually gone. Everything was calm, and they didn't have any more issues. And after returning those coins, they had no more issues with shadow people whispering and moving stuff around in their kitchen. So,
wow, that's kind of crazy. And you were in that same apartment?
Yeah, I was in that same apartment. It was crazy. This lady was, I mean, she had so many stories and crazy stuff. Like other interesting thing I'll share, and this is not my second story, but she would talk about how So there's this thing that we call sleep paralysis, that scientists call sleep paralysis.
I've heard of that before.
And so scientists say it's sleep paralysis where your body's paralyzed, and they'll say, oh, people hallucinate.
But you're like awake.
You're awake, but you can't move your body. And like people will say that they see people like sitting, like spirits sitting on their chest, or all kinds of stuff like that. Or they'll see people, but they can't move. And obviously the scientists say it's hallucination, but those who have experienced it say that it's something else. And so she said, she was like, yeah, I think that in Mexico they called it Subu la Muerte or something like that. And it's like the devil or the death gets on you, or I think that's kind of the translation, I guess.
Yeah.
And so what she said it happened all the time. And she said that she could feel like pressure on her legs. Like she would feel it from her feet going up to her chest, and she would feel like that paralyzing feeling. And so she was like, yeah, if I'm like sitting around and I start feeling that like on my legs and like that pressure, like that's like holding me down, she'd be like, get off me. And like, she's like, it'll stop. And so I'm like, dang.
Interesting. I wonder if any of our listeners have ever had an experience like that.
I don't know, man. If you have, let us know. Message us on Instagram. We'd love to know about it. But yeah, she was, that was very, very interesting to talk to her. And I was like, man, those guys really stepped in it. So I guess moral of the story here is don't take stuff that doesn't belong to you.
Literally, this is what I tell one of my kids every single day. I say, is that yours? And then he answers, no. And I say, then don't touch it.
And maybe you think you found treasure or lost pocket change. Maybe think twice about before you take that home. It might not be worth it.
Unless it is worth it.
Unless it is worth it. Like, side story. This is not a spooky story, but remember that? So our dad one time was on a camping trip with some scouts, and this was on Shackleford Island on the coast off the coast of North Carolina, and you can only take a ferry out there, and then the ferry comes back at a certain time, and so that's the only way to get out there. And so the scouts had camped on the island. The ferry was coming back the next morning to pick them up, and they were waiting for the ferry. And as the ferry was arriving, this kid comes up to my dad and is like, hey, look at all these coins I found. And he got a handful of coins that he had found like
buried in the sand.
In a stump, or buried in the sand,
Yeah.
like on the beach, like under a stump or something. And my dad's like, where did you find that? And he's like, over there, just in the sand. And like, he's like, what? And it was like a bunch of, I don't know what kind of coins I actually talked to
They might have been like Civil War coins or something. I can't remember what they were.
Yeah, I actually did talk to that kid, and I was like, because later I was going to ask him about it just to see if I could go back and try to find it. And then he was like, yeah, dude.
Insider information.
He was like, that was in the surf, and he was like, I still have the coin somewhere. It was a really old coin. He didn't remember very much about it, but anyway, hopefully he didn't bring anything back with him.
Hopefully not.
So here's my second story. So this one actually happened to me. Or you want to share a story?
Yeah, let me jump in. Let me share a story, because it actually kind of goes, it's similar to that one. This is also a mission story as well.
Okay, yeah, do that.
So, Jared was on his mission in Mexico, and then actually right before he got home, I went on my mission, which is 2 years as well, but I went to South America. I went to Chile, northern part of Chile.
Antofagasta.
Antofagasta was the name of the main city, but I was actually in a northern city. It was called Iquique, was the name of the city that I was in. And we are religious missionaries in the area. We talk with lots of people, and many people in the area consider the missionaries to be very spiritual. I'd say some missionaries are, some missionaries aren't as spiritual, but there was a family in the area that they had several little kids that I would say were all under the age of probably 10. And we were contacted by the family. They asked us to come talk with them because they had, well, I'm doing air quotes right now, something weird going on in their house. And us as missionaries, we were kind of like, we're 19, 20 years old. We're like, okay, well, I don't know. Let's go see. Maybe we can help. Maybe we will see something cool. I don't know. So we get there and we walk in the house, and we're met by the parents. And we go in, we sit down on the couch, and they tell us what's going on. So their two daughters, who at the time were 8 and 6 years old, had started to hear things and to see what they called shadows in their room. And they even said that at some points they felt like tugging on their blankets while they were sleeping, which was really weird. So the parents, obviously they kind of kept an eye on stuff, but the girls, they would, sometimes in the mornings and at night they would say, the shadows are bothering us again. They're bothering us again. And so they had told us that ever since these issues started happening, that there was just this overwhelming feeling of just dread in the house. It was like, everybody was just angry at each other, and there was just dread, and it just, you could almost feel it when you went in, that it was just heavy. Or I don't know if you ever felt that before, but it was just kind of heavy. So they were telling us the stories and stuff, and then basically everything the night before they called us, that's when everything came to a head. It was probably about 10 o'clock, they said. They had just put their kids down to sleep. After a while, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 minutes, they said that one of their daughters came out and said, the shadows are bothering us again, and they're saying mean things to us. And, they're whispering to us. And the parents, they were like, what? And so they stood up and they rushed into the room and, flicked on the light, but there's nothing apparently wrong with the room or the girls. They weren't harmed in any way or anything. They just were saying these things. And so what they decided to do was they didn't know what to do. And so they said, well, let's say a prayer. So they decided to say a prayer to try and ward off or scare off anything that might be evil in the house. So they were all standing there and they started to say this prayer, and as they were saying the prayer, all of the windows in the entire house, like the glass in the windows, just started to shake. And as they started to shake it, they kind of got nervous, obviously, and then they kept going in this prayer, and then all of the doors, the internal doors of the house to the bedrooms, started swinging open and closed and slamming shut as they were in the house saying this prayer. After a while, they said they finished the prayer, and after a while it kind of stopped. After a couple seconds, and they were pretty freaked out. So somehow they were able to sleep that night. I don't know. I probably would have been like, peace, I'm gonna go sleep in the car. I don't know. But they called us the next morning and they said, hey, we would like you to come over and just we want to talk to you about this. And so we said, okay, we'd be happy to come over and talk with you. And that's when we got there. So they said that ever since that whole night, after that night, and that all the chaos happened with the doors and the windows, that there was this terrible smell coming from the house, right? And it was like a smell of a rotting animal carcass. It was just terrible. It was just the type of smell that just stuck to your nose. I had smelt it when we first went into the house, but I figured I didn't want to be impolite. I didn't want to be rude, so I just kind of ignored it, right? There's
a lot of smelly houses sometimes.
There's a lot of smelly houses sometimes, especially in some of the areas that I'm sure Jared and I were able to experience, right? So we get up and they tell us a story, and then we get up and we kind of walk around to all of the rooms in this house. It was just right after they told us this story, and so we were both kind of like, oh man, is something else going to happen? Are we going to whatever? And so what we were trying to do is they said they hadn't had any more other experiences like that, but we were trying to help them identify what this terrible smell was. And so we went to every single room of the house, and then in the girls' bedroom, it was the most potent, right? It was super, super strong. And, we were the dad was scared, and he was like, just help us, right? And so we tore that room apart. We were smelling the beds and the walls and the it was tile floor, but the floor and in the closet, and we talked about, did maybe one of your daughters have an accident or something? And it didn't really smell like that, but he was like, no, nothing. And so we never found out exactly what it was, but it was permeating. So The only thing that I found, and obviously this didn't contribute to that smell, but the only thing that I really found was in the corner of the girl's room there was a small TV in the bedroom, and next to that TV were some pretty heavy, scary movies. Like, I mean, these were like the Omen. I mean, some of these like really scary movies that are pretty. I don't know the word satanic or whatever it might be. I don't tend to watch those types of movies, but I think it's definitely something that a 6 and an 8-year-old probably should be watching,
Yeah.
right? And so I pointed them out to the parents, and the parents were like, "Oh, I've never seen that before. I didn't even know that they had that." And the girls had admitted to watching them, but it's just kind of interesting, you know. It's maybe if you know. Potentially invite something in, or you're constantly thinking about something, then you know, it might, I don't know all the ins and outs, but you know, you're maybe more sensitive to something happening. So we spoke to the family for a little bit longer. We said another prayer, and we left. We ended up following back up with them once every, you know, week or so, just to kind of see how things were going. And they said that they hadn't had any more issues, that after probably about 2 days, the smell like completely faded. And they didn't have any more issues. They didn't have any more problems. Now, you know, like I said, I'm not an expert at this stuff, and I don't even pretend to know what actually happened. But it was just kind of a crazy story that, you know, as my companion and I were walking back to our apartment that night, we were just like, man, that was heavy. We were just, that was weird. I mean, we were both kind of freaked out a little bit.
Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, one small story I have is that something similar to that. We were just walking along the street, and, you know, people in that country, they know us, and they know who we are. Sometimes people will think like we're FBI or something, or migration or some immigration.
Wearing white shirts and ties.
Yeah. So, but this one family flagged us down, and it was this lady who lived in this small apartment, and she had, you know, like 4 or 5 kids, little kids, and she was like, "Yeah, there's something in our apartment." Or there's something in our house. And she goes she takes us to the back, and she says, "Last night my kids saw a little boy standing right here, and then he disappeared, and right by this bush." They kind of an open back patio that kind of like went into their house. And she was like, "Can you get rid of this thing?" And we were like, "Yeah." So like we said a prayer, we kind of gave a blessing on the house, and then we followed up with them a couple days later, and several weeks, over a couple weeks, and they said it had gone away. They hadn't had any more experiences, but it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, cool. I have another story. This is a more impactful story than the one I just shared, but this one was probably one of the craziest things I experienced along these lines in my mission. Regarding, you know, spirits and whatnot. So this story, there was a sister in our ward, in our congregation that I was serving in at the time. I think this was in San Luis Potosí, the city of San Luis Potosí in the state of San Luis Potosí, and very, very nice lady. Her mother had just passed away, and so one time we went to their house, and you know, I was talking to her, and we were just, you know, listening to her and talking to her. She was obviously very sad about her mother passing away. I don't think it was like a tragic thing. She just was old, and then she just died. And so, you know, she was still sad, and we, you know, had just visited with her a little bit. And at the time, she told us, you know, some weird things have been happening around the house. And we're like, well, what kind of weird things? And she told us a couple of weird things that happened, but you know, one of the ones I remember specifically that she said was that, like, they in Mexico, they use these 5-gallon jugs of water. So, like, you know, like the water cooler talk, you know, like the 5-gallon, they call them garrafones, big blue bottles. So they have that, and it's in, like, the way that they had it in their house was in like a contraption to where you'd like put it in this metal contraption that had a hinge on it, so you could easily hinge it down and you could pour it into a bowl or a cup or something like that. And it just allowed you to pour the entire bottle easier. And so she said that the bottle would like move on the hinge on its own. And so, like, I mean, that bottle's pretty heavy when it's full of 5 gallons of water. And so she said that it would like tilt and then like swing back on its own. And I was like, that's pretty weird. And she was like, yeah. And so that was the one thing she told us at the time. And then I think we went to her house. We went to her house a few days later for lunch. She invited us over for lunch. Usually as missionaries, we would eat with people for lunch and sometimes dinner. And so we went to eat at her house. And this is a very common thing that they would feed us. And so she, made us lunch, and we were chatting and talking, and we were sitting at a long table. So I was imagining like a long table, and I was sitting at the head of the table, and my other missionary companion was sitting to my left, near me at the end of the table. And then we had eaten, and we had finished eating, and she came and sat down on my right, also at the end of the table. So there was probably another seat on the other side of my companion, and then on the other side of her, and then there was a chair at the other end of the table, which was probably, I don't know, like 6 feet away. I mean, it was a long table. And so I'm chatting, and then we say, usually before we left, we would always share like a spiritual message, a scripture, or just a thought to kind of, get them through the week or whatever. And so I said, Hermana, can I share a scripture with you? And she said, yeah, sure, of course. And I remember reaching down to my left. I had my bag on my left. So I looked down into my bag, and I grabbed my scriptures, and I pulled them up, and I looked across the table, and the chair at the other end of the table pulled straight out, like someone was going to sit down. And I just look across the table, and I just look at the sister, and I say, was that you? And she's like, that was not me. I told you weird stuff has been happening. I looked at my companion, and he's like, did you see the picture? I said, what? And there was a picture of it was like juice, some kind of juice that the sister had made. And so when they make it, they actually make it pretty fresh. And so like the stuff had settled to the bottom. And so the part that I didn't see, because I was looking down to grab my scriptures, someone, like, there was a spoon inside this pitcher. And the spoon basically went all the way around and stirred the pitcher. It went all the way around in a circle, like someone had grabbed the spoon and stirred the pitcher to stir everything up, like as if you were going to drink it, so all the stuff was all stirred up. It stirred it, and then the chair pulled out right away. And I was like, no way. This is crazy. And I was like, and there's no way that my companion could have kicked that chair, or there's no way that she could have done it. I actually looked under the table, and it was too far. The chair literally pulled out like someone was sitting down like that, like her mom came and said, oh, the missionaries are going to share a scripture. She stirred the pitcher of our drink, the juice that we were drinking, pulled out the chair to sit down and listen to me share a scripture. And I was like, wow. It was a pretty surreal moment. And I actually tried to squint my eyes. I was like, maybe I squint my eyes, I can see something. Didn't work. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird because literally I was sharing a scripture with someone that I could not see, with someone that was beyond the veil. And so it just kind of makes me think that, sometimes those who have passed on, maybe they can see us. They can see us. I mean, in that case, she literally pulled out a chair to sit down, or something did, to listen to what I was about to share. I wouldn't think that like a malevolent spirit would sit down and want to hear me share a scripture about Jesus, but it was pretty incredible and kind of an impactful moment too, just to realize that, to see physically that there's more, more than we understand. There's more beyond the veil. I know we talk about that and it, with religion in general, but to actually see something like that is very cool.
Yeah, no, I was actually thinking about that the other day, and it's kind of like, well, we're talking about these stories, and I actually went back and looked at my, I had written some of this story down whenever I was on my mission, and it just kind of proves that, there's potential, there's so many things out there that we don't understand, that we don't know, and it's kind of like what we said earlier, and it's just, you don't know what you don't know, and so that's cool. Yeah, that's an awesome story.
Yeah.
All right, so I had put together, I heard this, let's call it a legend, right? a while ago, and I went back and I was actually reading it a couple more times. I actually listened to it. It's called The Russian Sleep Experiment. And there's a lot of controversy out there, I'll say. I don't know if it's controversy, but whether it is an actual story or whether it's kind of
Urban legend
an
or
urban
something.
legend made something up. Supposedly there's old Soviet records of this experiment that they did. And but it's all hearsay. I guess we'll leave it up to the listener to decide if it's real or not. So
Do your own investigations.
yeah. So this was called the Russian Sleep Experiment, and actually, I think that I was reading that they're supposed to come out with a movie on this in 2020. So this was in the early 1940s. There was a Soviet testing facility that was where the military had approved this experiment on 5 prisoners. So basically, the experiment was they were studying basically sleep and sleep deprivation. So these 5 prisoners, they were sealed inside of this gas chamber, and they continuously pumped this stimulant gas into the chamber. And basically, this stimulant gas was to help keep them it kept them awake, and it was just like they were constantly in this super hyper state, and they couldn't fall asleep. So the goal was that they were going to try to keep these people awake for 30 days. And they told these prisoners that if they completed the experiment, that they would let them go. And so obviously the prisoners were motivated as well, and they were like, well, all I got to do is stay awake and then they'll let me go. So during the first couple days, the report says that everything was relatively normal. I mean, there's lots of people that stay up that for 24, 48 plus hours, that they're continually working and stuff like that. So it was pretty normal. But they said that the prisoners, they were able to speak with each other in this big room in the chamber, and they said that as they got more tired, they got more restless, they got more angry. The conversations that they were having kind of just got darker and darker. After about 9 days, the report says that one of the prisoners just started screaming, just uncontrollable screaming, and the other prisoners that were there, I mean, they've been awake for 9 days supposedly, and the other prisoners were there, that they were just in this kind of like, they did some testing, and they said that they were in like basically brain dead to a certain extent, that they had just completely shut off, that their body was, that they were almost like they were asleep but awake at the same time. But so this guy just started screaming for so long and so loud that he actually tore his vocal cords, and he had to be removed from the experiment. So when the second person started screaming, then and this was a day later, they said that all of the prisoners that were left inside this chamber, they took paper and blankets, everything else, and they covered up all of the observation holes that were that the scientists were using to study the experiment, right, and to observe the experiment. So they couldn't see anything that was in there. But the scientists said, well, let's just run with it, right? Let's continue pumping this gas into this chamber so that these people won't let their sleep. And they had super bright lights on, like so loud to where, or so light to where it was almost impossible to sleep. So as the days went on, they actually, it was just very, very quiet. They didn't hear anything. And in fact, at day 15, leading up until day 15, they actually had to come over the intercom because they couldn't see in there. And they came over the intercom and said, is anybody there? Is anybody alive? All they heard was just a very soft affirmative. Yes. And that was it. And so they said, okay. So when they got to day 15, they came on the intercom and they said, okay, we decided to turn the gas off. We're going to open the door and we're going to check on the prisoners. And they told them they were going to do that. And the prisoners said, no, do not open the door. Do not turn off the gas. We do not want to fall asleep. They said that if we fall asleep, we will die. And I guess they feared at that point. It had been so long, and they were so sleep deprived that they feared sleep, because they thought that they were just in so much pain and so much agony that they just thought it just meant instant death if they just gave up. So they ended up opening the door anyway, and the scene when they opened the door was pretty grotesque. One of the prisoners had passed away. They said that a couple of the other prisoners had really, really severe injuries from self-harm, and they were severe enough to where they needed immediate medical attention. And so they pulled them out of this chamber, and they got them medical attention, but the whole time they were fighting. And the place that I was reading about this experience says that there was a couple things that the doctors noticed about these people. They had done a bunch of tests with them before they put them in this chamber, and when they pulled them out, that they were physically a lot stronger. Their bodies were super resilient to certain sedative drugs and stuff that they gave them, and that could have been a result of the prolonged exposure to
the gas or something.
The gas, yeah. And so they ended up getting the medical attention, and then the prisoners were like, we want to go back in. We want to go back in. We want to, I don't know if they were addicted to the gas or whatever it was, but they were like, we don't want to fall asleep. One of the guys fell asleep, and his body just completely gave out. So they went to put these people back in.
Did he die?
Yeah, so the one guy died, and they went to put these people back in the chamber, and the military said, well, they said there was 2 people left that were alive, or that hadn't dropped out of the experiment, and the military told the scientists, they said, we're going to lock these people back in, but you have to be in there with them monitoring them this time. And the scientists were like, no way. I'm not going in there and monitoring this. I'm not going to do this. And one of the scientists freaked out so much that he actually pulled a gun. They said that he shot the commander, and there's 2 prisoners left, shot one of the prisoners, and then he just refused completely to go in there. So they took him out, and they found a guy that was willing to go into the chamber for with this last guy to hopefully live out the next the rest of the 30 days that they were trying to get to. But it was interesting. They said that he went in there with the guy, and that it wasn't but 10 hours in there, and the scientist guy was just so freaked out, and the guy was being so crazy and just unconsolable and violent that he just wasn't. He said that he wasn't even a recognizable human anymore, and so he said that the researcher asked him, "What are you?" And the prisoner says that the prisoner smiled back and said that he was the inherent evil inside the human mind that is only kept in check by sleeping. That was kind of interesting. The end of the story, it says the researcher actually ended up getting in an altercation with this guy and killed him. So, yeah, it was kind of cool. I don't know if the story's true or not. I don't know if it was 15 days or it was 5 days or whatever it was. I'm sure that there's been lots of experiments like this. I mean, just think some of the crazy and evil things that Hitler did during the Nazis did during World War II. But that being said, I just thought it was really interesting that they said that he said that he was the inherent evil inside the human mind that is only kept in check by sleeping. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, dang, if I go to bed too late and wake up too early, sometimes I'm just super angry. I'm short. I'm quick to anger. and it's just can you imagine, 5 days without sleeping. Or,
Yeah, I can
or
imagine
even,
it. Well,
even more,
It's
10
like having
days without
a
sleeping.
newborn.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You get
crazy.
at the end of your rope and you're just like, In fact, with our second, he was just an awful sleeper, and I had to declare a state of emergency for our family because he would just not sleep at all. Like he would just cry almost all night. So we were pretty much at our wits' end. But luckily,
it
through.
will literally drive you crazy. And I think there's a lot of people that have, like, I don't know, maybe mental breakdowns or physical breakdowns and, just like the physical trauma just from the stress of lack of sleep and consistently having to, deal with something that's kind of out of your hands.
Well, it's like you need to learn. Those guys should have learned to sleep like Gandalf, with his eyes open.
Yeah. You'd be like, no, I'm awake. Yeah,
Dang.
5-minute power nap.
Well, those gulags, those Russian gulags, where they basically shipped all the dissidents and like political enemies to these gulags out in Siberia. Man, that's like, if you actually like dig into that and research that, it's just insane how barbaric, how many lives have been lost due to communism.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good story.
Yeah,
I think
I liked all the stories. I think they're all pretty cool. I mean, and those are just our experiences. Other than, I didn't experience the Russian sleep experiment, right? But
thank goodness.
yeah, thank goodness. But that's the cool thing about how these are just our stories. I'm sure everyone has some sort of stories, whether they're, they don't have to be, this is our Halloween special. It doesn't have to be a spooky story, but, just cool things like this that kind of, they make you think a little bit. They make you think about maybe the life beyond.
Yeah.
They make you think about, what am I currently doing? They make you think about your loved ones, or even, what would I do in this type of situation? So,
Or the atrocities of communism.
yeah, that too. I mean,
yeah, that's crazy. Well, to everybody out there, if you have any cool stories like this, share them with us. Message us on Instagram, or you can email us, right? At
a brother's creed at gmail.com.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and look forward to next time.
All those out there who are interested in more experiences, please join us on our next podcast, and let's build our creed together.